I like to add to my winners quite often, especially when I was trading small caps. And it would work kind of similarly to what you described there, where you would be, let's say I took it from a level, it came up, broke above VWAP, kind of rested there. I would take half profit there. And then if it
Mm-hmm.
dipped back down, I would, add what I took off. And then I set my stop at break even. And I'm like, now I basically guaranteed myself a small little win. And
Yeah.
if it stops me break even, so be it. But if I'm expecting that VWAP to continue to hold, that, I'd like to be back in. And that does obviously move your average up. And I think that in that instance, as long as you know that you have like a really good entry to where, because if you're much closer to VWAP and you average up and it's like, and your stops break even, you're getting stopped out because it's,
Yeah.
right next to it. So I think that as long as you really emphasize like how good your entry is and you're very confident, like, oh yeah, this will give me space, and I think that I call it a free play where you take half profit, add kind of on a dip back, and then set a stop break even, zero risk.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it does stop you out and you're like, oh, I could
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
taken full profit at VWAP or whatever, but I think in terms of opportunity cost, I like to consider that, pretty good as long as that entry is good. So I think that you're both right. There we go. That was my cop out.
No, I appreciate you saying that. And it I like this strategy only because I didn't learn it anywhere, and I'm like very stubborn on I got to do my own thing and I got to like sort of figure this out for myself. But it will mess you up sometimes doing that, cuz
Yeah,
you'll have a $500 or $600 profit that you didn't take, and then you'll close it out for $20 or so. I
yeah.
mean, like
That's That's why I
really screw
removed the
you.
PNL from my screens because, like, until I look at the end of the day and see how much money I made, like, everything is just imaginary. Because, like, it could go up, and I'm like, the worst loss I ever took was actually a win, right? And I'll tell people this all the time. When I was first started trading, I was, I had no idea really what I was doing. I thought I was good, I wasn't. Um, and I was into, I can't remember what it was, one of these small caps going ballistic, you know how they do. And I had like a $3,000 account, and I was up like 2 grand. And I was like, it's just gonna keep going. I'm over here screenshotting it, having the
Sure,
blast.
sure.
And then it halts down, and I closed. Like, I immediately got stopped out after the halt, and I made $50. And I was like devastated because I just started trading, and I was like, that was almost doubling my account. Like, that was it. And I literally had that money, and I was taking pictures of it. And I went to Chuck E. Cheese that day, and I remember just being like, this hurts worse than any amount of money I've ever lost because, like, I had it, right?
Mhm.
And, that instilled in me two things. First, don't be greedy, don't be an idiot,
Yeah.
especially on small caps. But two, it was like I can't be seeing that because that, I can't be seeing how up or down I am because that will affect my ability to play like what my plan is, which is the chart. Because my plan wasn't based on my PNL, so to now incorporate that as part of my plan means that like, obviously, that it doesn't compute. It's not part of that process. So removing that has helped me a lot because now I play the candles that I see, treat it kind of like a game, and less like a oh shoot, that's $200. I'm exactly 200 red. This will bring me green to the day, and then it goes a bazillion dollars, and you're like, oh wow, if I had just not focused on recovering from red and being break even and taking profit there, I would have been up $800 today. So I feel like it really
Yeah.
interferes in my process, which is why I don't like to look at it. At the end of the day, I usually once I look at my P&L, I don't trade anymore. So sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, and you kind of have an idea for like, oh, I've taken this many wins or this many losses today. Like if it's gonna be green or red, and you kind of can mentally keep track of like, oh yeah, I'm getting my ass whipped today, or like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I'm having a good day, and that is okay, but not having that strict dollar amount, I think, helps me quite a bit.
By accessing this podcast, you acknowledge that the Penny Lane podcast makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional or financial advice. Unless specifically stated otherwise, the Penny Lane podcast does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement. The third-party materials or content of any third-party site referenced in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions, standards, or policies of the Penny Lane podcast. The Penny Lane podcast assumes no responsibility or liability for the accuracy or completeness of the content contained in third-party materials or on third-party sites referenced in this podcast, or the compliance with applicable laws of such materials and or links referenced herein.